BCaiS. Haribol over them. Yeah, okay. All right. What am I doing? Okay, devotees, we have our questions and answers session now. And this evening, we have 14 questions just from different groups of devotees. Education, Gmail, Messenger, anyway, they're questions on Krishna consciousness, so we'll try to answer them. We'll answer them all. First of all, some prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharne Niravishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadeshtarne Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakapatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. All right, so here we go, devotees. The first question. Srila Prabhupada used to say that we should come back home to Krishna already in this life. In other words, you should try to practice very seriously in order to attain an advanced level and be ready to go to Krishna. It makes one think that if you are not practicing, quote unquote, very seriously, you are not good enough. What if I think that I should go back to him in this life, but he actually has plans for me to stay here for another 100 lives, etc.? In the end, he is the controller, not me. Could you elaborate a little bit about that? Well, yes. You know, of course, sometimes we talk about, and Srila Prabhupada talked about, going back to Godhead, as in sort of like a geographical movement, something like that. And even Srila Prabhupada has named his magazine Back to Godhead. But back to Godhead is not just a geographical thing like, you know, going back to work tomorrow or something of that sort. It's a matter of a consciousness. It's a matter of developing love for Krishna. You cannot go back to Godhead unless you develop love for Krishna. So the real point is to develop our love for Krishna. That's the real point. And if we develop our love for Krishna, then we'll be quite ready. It will not be a problem for us to accept if he, at the end of this life, he comes and tells us that, you know, I want you to take birth again in order to preach, in order to help my movement. Then the devotee, if the devotee has developed love for Krishna, then the devotee will immediately say, yes, of course, if that's what you want. Because love means to please the beloved, to do what the beloved wants. If we're not ready to do that, how can we say we love a person? We say we love a person and they ask us to do something, and we say, well, no thanks. I don't think I want to do that. It means we don't love the person. So this is the point. And therefore the devotees, ultimately the devotees don't really care if I go back to Godhead at the end of this life, or if Krishna wants me to go somewhere else and help spread his movement. The devotee will be very happy. Whatever Krishna wants will be the thing which will make the devotee the most happy. So therefore, don't worry. Don't worry. You should just try to develop your love for Krishna. And you should try to practice seriously. Because the more you put in, the more you will get out. Definitely, very much so. If you really put your whole heart in, your whole heart will be filled with affection and love for Krishna. Yeah. But if we are half-hearted, then we'll be half satisfied, maybe, and half not satisfied. It'll be something like that. We certainly won't be fully satisfied at all if we don't really practice seriously. Yes. So, number 2, how to build relationships with home Gaunitai deities. Yes, well, that's interesting, isn't it? How to make it as much as possible personal and not just performance of services because I have to. Well, you know, the first thing is you shouldn't get deities for home unless you already have a strong desire to really serve them nicely. You know, they're not for decoration or to impress other devotees or other people. They're for being served seriously, as we said in regard to the previous question. So that's the first thing. Don't get home deity. Well, first you should only get home deities if you get permission from your spiritual master. If you don't get permission, don't get home deities. And you should only ask for permission from the spiritual master if you really feel you want to render service to those deities. Yes, that, and you should find out beforehand what do you have to do to serve home deities. And just see, are you able to do that? Do you have the time? And particularly, do you have the desire? Anyway, if it's already too late that you got home deities, but actually you were not ready for them, well, anyway, then what you need to do is, under the guidance of the spiritual master, under the guidance of experienced devotees, experienced in worshipping deities, you should get some education on deities. What is the importance, what is the value of deity worship? So that you appreciate more that, oh yes, this is very important, and a desire develops in your heart to really do it nicely. You should do that. And even after that, if you still, you don't really want to look after the deities and worship them and have them as the focal points of your life. If it's still, you're just doing some program because you have to, then I'd suggest giving the deities to someone who really wants deities and who really will look after them. Because if you're doing it in the mood of, I just have to, and not because you want to, then you'll commit offenses, and your deity worship, instead of helping you progress, your deity worship will produce suffering for you. Yeah. 3. Is it bad that sometimes I can't chant japa with others because it's disturbing or irritating to hear when other devotees are chanting, for example, loud or with a very melodious voice, etc.? It's okay. Some devotees, a fair number, they prefer just to chant their japa on their own anyway, rather than be amongst a number of other devotees who are chanting. So there's nothing wrong with wanting to chant your japa on your own, as long as you're really able to chant nicely on your own. If there are other devotees, like if you're chanting with a group, but there are other devotees who are chanting too loud, well, you should ask them not to. Because Prabhupada has said the volume that we chant at should be such that we can hear ourselves chant, and the person sitting next to us, if there was someone right next to us, they would be able to hear. Not like loud, but if they listened, they'd be able to hear. If the volume is like that, and there is a person next to you, then they will be able to chant and hear if your volume is not so loud like that. If someone's chanting with a very melodious voice, well, I don't know about that. Maybe just go and sit in a different part of the room. Yeah. But personally, just speaking for myself personally, I like to chant with other devotees. And so every day I do. Every morning, every afternoon, I chant with other devotees. But I know some devotees, very senior devotees, sannyasis, gurus, GBC members, they prefer to chant on their own, and they do. And they feel they chant better like that. So there's no hard and fast rule, except that you should chant wherever you can chant and hear your chanting the best. If it's with other devotees, it's easier for you to chant with other devotees, do that. If somehow or other you find it disturbing or just not so fulfilling to chant with other devotees, but you're able to chant nicely on your own, then you can do that. But, not if you're chanting on your own and your mind is just wandering and you can't focus and you can't chant nicely, getting distracted, etc. Okay, number 4. Should one sit still when chanting japa, or can one move back and forth with one's spine? I've heard that one's back should be still because of prana flow. Wow. Okay. What is correct? Well, if someone told you you should sit with your back still because of prana flow, I think they're telling you something from the 19th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Or it might be the 13th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah, it is not something coming from our spiritual masters. It's not from Prabhupada or our previous acharyas. And, like I said a few minutes ago, when it comes to chanting, there are not exactly hard and fast rules. The only hard and fast rule is that you somehow or other, you should be in the most suitable place, at the most suitable time, in the most suitable environment, so you can chant as nicely as you're able and hear your chanting as nicely as you're able. That's the only rule, really. Srila Prabhupada, you may have seen, there's video of Srila Prabhupada walking and chanting in his rooms. Yeah. So if it helps, if it's easier for you, stand up and walk around and chant, if it makes it easier or better for you. But as far as, if you're sitting, can you move in one way or another? You can. You can, definitely. But, don't do anything. If you're chanting with other devotees, don't do anything which is going to disturb the other devotees. Yeah. Okay. All right. This is now a question. I'm avoiding number 5 because it's a bit of a silly question, at least it seems to be. But if the person who has written this question really wants an answer, they can write to me. So, Kasturi Manjari, if they're serious about getting an answer to the question, they could tell you and I'll write an answer. So number 6, in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 69, it is said that no one is dearer to him than one who risks everything to preach his glories. What does it mean to risk everything as a grihasta? Well, for a grihasta, it means that you don't just sit comfortably at home all the time. I mean, of course, you should sit there comfortably at least some of the time and associate with the family members and encourage them in Krishna consciousness. But for a householder, like what Srila Prabhupada did when he was a householder, he was trying to look after his family, but he was also trying to take opportunities to preach. He was having programs at home. Sometimes he was having programs in different temples and just different places. Yeah, and even when he was still a householder, he would travel around to some degree and preach. So this is what it means for a householder to take some risk, to make some effort, and really try to do something to help spread the Krishna consciousness movement. In Srimad Bhagavatam 11:28, it is said that such a person, some person, being neither very disgusted with nor attached to material life, should achieve perfection through the path of loving devotion to me. This is Krishna speaking. Later in the purport, it's mentioned that if a person is disgusted with material life, he takes to impersonalism. Will I become impersonalist if I'm disgusted with this material world? Well, in the verse, as you've read, it says, such a person being neither very disgusted with or very attached to material life can achieve perfection. So, we have to be somewhat disgusted with the material world because it's pretty disgusting. It really is. If you look carefully at it, you'll see all these horrible things happening. Like just right now at this moment in America, I think yesterday, the government changed the laws about abortion. And so it's making it, I think, quite a bit, like much more difficult for women to legally have abortions. And in other words, they've made it more difficult for women to kill their children. That's actually the fact. So we should be disgusted. We should be disgusted. I mean, with so many things in material life, we should be disgusted. I mean, it's the intelligent reaction, because there's just so much rubbishy things going on. But if you become very disgusted, if you become too disgusted, then instead of reacting to all the nonsense in some very extreme way, like, as you've said, taking to impersonalism, or it is said also, perhaps going insane, just because it's just too much horror, or even committing suicide. People become too disgusted with their lives. Some of them commit suicide. So there is such a thing as becoming very disgusted, too disgusted. So you lose the ability to react in intelligent and constructive ways. Means in Krishna consciousness very nicely. So therefore we have to watch ourselves. The impersonalists, they become too disgusted, and therefore they think that, for example, to eat nice prasadam is not good because it's just sense gratification. to handle money in spiritual life. Should never handle money, because you may become contaminated. But Krishna consciousness means to use things in Krishna's service. So, material things, use material things in Krishna's service. And not just in a dogmatic way, just reject everything. Like they don't like nice prasadam. They would rather eat just some rubbishy something. Nice prasadam, they think it's sense gratification. Nice kirtan, beautiful kirtan, oh, it's sense gratification. So if a person feels that nice things in Krishna consciousness, which are accepted by the devotees as normal, nice things, and appreciated by the devotees, but if one finds that one is just feeling, no, I want to reject them because they're not spiritual enough, then this would be an indication of being too disgusted. Yeah. So, number 8, I struggle to chant Gayatri Mantra every day. Sometimes I end up not having chanted Gayatri Mantras at the end of the day. I believe it's because I don't have an understanding of what Gayatri Mantra chanting really means and why it's important to chant it. Can you please explain more about the importance or meaning or benefit? Yeah, of course, this is a bit of a higher level question. But the thing is, the Gayatri Mantras, they are statements, and so they have meaning. So you should learn the meanings of those mantras. Otherwise, you're just chanting some syllables, and it's not like a really substantial thing. But if you understand the meanings, because they have beautiful meanings, it's amazing. If you understand the meanings, then you'll feel, yes, I must chant Gayatri, and I must chant it nicely, very attentively. So, that's the basic idea. But also, chanting Gayatri properly, chanting it at the right times of the day, very attentively like that. If you really do it properly, it will help your Krishna consciousness, of course, because they're special mantras, glorifying the Lord and Lord Krishna, Lord Chaitanya, the spiritual master. Yeah, there's special mantras. Anyway. If you understand them, I think it will help you a lot. And you'll see that they help you in your Krishna consciousness, and they help you chant Hare Krishna. Not that they're superior to Hare Krishna. They're not. They're inferior, a little bit. But they're still very wonderful mantras, and if you chant them nicely, they'll really help you progress. So, okay. My question is, what is the relationship with our japa beads? How are we concerned and connected with our japa beads? Okay. Our japa beads generally have been sanctified, have been chanted on by the spiritual master. Our japa beads are tulsi, at least if you're an initiated devotee. Your japa beads will be tulsi. So chanting on them, just touching the beads, has great benefit for you, for us, definitely. So therefore the devotees, they always look after their japa beads. They always do. And if it's possible, of course, they're placed on some form of string or something like that. And sometimes that string or thread or whatever, sometimes it breaks. It's more or less inevitable that it must break sometime, particularly because you're handling the beads a lot every day. Eventually, it may take many years, but eventually it'll cut through the string. Yeah, so devotees look after their beads. As much as possible, if your beads do break, you should get them repaired rather than, consumer consciousness. Just go down to the shop and get another one. So rather we should look after our beads, particularly our beads which have been chanted on by the spiritual master at the time of initiation. And we should try and keep them in good shape until the end of our lives. Yeah. Because they're very sacred. And the more you chant on them, the more sanctified they become. While chanting, why do you shake the bag at certain times? All right. Well, it's because the beads sometimes tend to get a little tangled with each other. So sometimes we shake them just so they don't become tangled. Still, sometimes they become entangled with each other. That's a fact. But that's the idea. Keep the beads from getting sort of wrapped around each other too much. How can one progress in her or his sadhana? Well, there are many things that can be said about that. But one thing is, get up early in the morning. The morning is the best time for sadhana, meaning chanting and hearing and these things, kirtan. The morning's the best time. So therefore, if you want to improve your sadhana, you should make a point of getting up early and taking a nice bath and putting on clean clothes and then going to the temple room or wherever your altar is and chant there. Yes. So yeah, this is basically how you improve your sadhana. Get up early and take a bath and then really try to chant as attentively as possible. This is the secret for success in Krishna consciousness. Get up early and really chant attentively. Please, can you explain a little bit more about becoming immortal by reading Srimad Bhagavatam? I've heard this quite often in many Srimad Bhagavatam classes. Okay, it's not exactly that we become immortal. as if we're temporary now, but then we practice Krishna consciousness, and then our nature changes and we become something else. We become immortal. No, we are already immortal. Satchit Ananda. This is the nature of the soul. Eternal, full of bliss and full of knowledge. So we're already eternal. We don't need to become, immortal. Eternal, same difference. What we do need to do, the problem, so to speak, is that we need to realize our immortality. And in order to do that, we have to really, as the devotee in the first question said, we have to really practice very seriously. Because whatever you put in, you will tend to get that out. So we really need to practice properly. And if we do, then we will realize our eternal, immortal nature. It's already there. It's just covered over by the mode of ignorance, tamagun. But by chanting nicely, by reading Srimad Bhagavatam, that's what you say. By reading Srimad Bhagavatam, you come to realize, I'm an eternal spirit soul. You really do. So you don't become immortal, you realize your existing immortality. Please can you explain the significance of the word dhimahi in the first shloka of Srimad Bhagavatam? Yes, well, we read what Prabhupada said. That dhimahi means meditate, meditation, or to meditate. That we should meditate. In that case, in the first shloka of Srimad Bhagavatam, we need to meditate on Krishna. Yes. So, and the word dhimahi is traditionally used, not absolutely always, but it's traditionally very much used in a mantra which is a Gayatri mantra. So, yeah. So that first verse, because of the presence of the word dhimahi, it indicates that that verse is a type of Gayatri mantra. I mean, not just absolutely, but to some degree is a type of Gayatri mantra. Yes, because generally you won't find dhimahi, at least it's unusual to find the word dhimahi, in any word which is not a Gayatri mantra. I mean, maybe in some cases it's possible if there's just in a verse in scripture, they're just talking about meditation. They might use the word, but they also might not use it because there are other words you can use. And dhimahi specifically denotes generally that this is a Gayatri mantra. And, chanting Gayatri mantra has to be done very carefully at certain times of the day, 7 days a week. Yes. Last question. What is the difference between mat and temple? Yeah, the main difference really is that a mat, it's kind of like a preaching center in the sense that it's a place for renunciates, for preachers, brahmacharis and sannyasis. Yeah. So, a temple has a broader sort of utility than a mutt. Oftentimes mutts may not or will not have any deities, because a mutt is just a place for renunciates to live, brahmacharis and sannyasis, mainly. Yeah. So a temple generally will have deities, but a mutt, of course it could do, but there are many mutts in India where they don't have deities, but they do have renunciates staying. So a mutt is sort of a relative of an ashram. An ashram may or may not have deities. In many cases it won't, actually, because it's basically a place for spiritual people to live. But mutt and ashram have some similarity. But mutt and temple, there is, some difference. Temple would typically mean all types of Krishna conscious activities going on, with all sorts of devotees involved, including grihastas, maybe living, it's not impossible, but maybe not living there, but doing service there. So yeah, that's the basic difference. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.